Welcome, everyone, to Visionary Women's Female Founders Salon. We are so happy to have you here. It's fabulous to see so many familiar faces and so many new ones. We are so happy to gather again at Brentwood Country Club and have a fantastic program for you this evening. Before we dive into our program, I'd like to introduce myself to those of you who don't know me. My name is Nadine Watt, and I have served on the board of Visionary Women since 2017. As a female founder and entrepreneur, I have been the only woman in the room for a long time, which had its pros and cons. Having such a narrow female perspective offers a one-sided slant to the decision-making process. Because I am the third generation in a family business, a lot of doors were opened for me. With this advantage, I made it my one goal to ensure more women were given the same opportunity. Women are continually underrepresented, and I believe it is part of my responsibility to continue to promote, hire, and mentor more women in the business. In fact, I have made it my obligation to help mentor young women to become executives and get into the C-suite. It's a new way of thinking that women bring to the table. Representation is key, and the fact that I can now provide, as a CEO who happens to be a woman, I care more about the community and the impact of the project and the legacy that it will leave. Thank you. I truly believe all businesses should be a reflection of our society, and female perspectives need not just be accounted for, but be nurtured and celebrated. In my opinion, one cannot claim to lead an industry which provides for all communities without multiple perspectives. That being said, it is also important for women to support one another, to create awareness of the issues that affect them in an industry. Be brave, be bold, but also be humble. Don't apologize. Do what you need to do. We are paving the way for the next generation. For those of you that are less familiar with our organization, I am excited to share a little bit about who we are and what we do at Visionary Women. Visionary Women is a social impact organization that drives change for pressing issues facing women and girls. We build community, invest in high-impact initiatives, and activate individual potential. Since we were established, we've granted over $2.5 million to programs and initiatives that work to improve the lives of women and girls locally and globally. I clap that. We thank all of you, our members, for helping to make that happen. If you'd like to learn more about how to become a member of our community, I encourage you to find one of our incredibly talented and hardworking board members to learn more. We have also finally chosen a date for our Women in Design January Salon. It will be held on January 16th, 2024, featuring Monique Lullier and Irene Neuwirth, correct? I'd also like our Visionary Women board members to kindly stand so you can give the audience a wave. We also have dedicated Gen V volunteers at the check-in table who can answer any questions related to membership and can also help those of you who'd like to register at the end of the meeting. We have a wonderful program here for you this evening, a female founder salon featuring Julie Wainwright, founder of the RealReal, and Katie Rodan, co-founder of Proactiv and co-founder of the anti-aging skincare company Rodan Fields. Moderated tonight by CNBC senior media and tech correspondent Julie Boorstin, author of When Women Lead. Thank you. We'd like to thank our longtime media partner, the Wall Street Journal, for their incredible support of our organization year over year. And finally, I'd like to thank Pomelato, tonight's event sponsor. It's because of your generosity that we can host events like these while fulfilling our mission to improve the lives of women and girls everywhere through our impact work. We're thrilled to have you with us this evening, Natalie Diamantis, the president and CEO of Pomelato America. Natalie has had an impressive career as a senior executive in the luxury jewelry space and has been with Pomelato for 6 years. Welcome to our community, Natalie. And before I invite you to the stage, I'd like to make sure everyone receives their generous gift card under your seat from Pomelato. It's been provided to each and every one of you. So Natalie, please come to the stage.
Thank you so much, Nadine. What an inspiring room. I mean, this is really incredible. I've seen former friends like the mayor of Beverly Hills, my wonderful friends here from the Valley who recently this summer we were together in Napa Valley, and many others. And Shelley, of course, you've always been such a wonderful, let's say, enthusiast about this organization for me. I was asked to talk about myself, which is not always my favorite topic, but it's true. I am the president and CEO of Pomellato for the Americas. How did I get here? Other women. And when I look back and people ask me how I landed the jobs that I did, another woman saw me and decided that I should be doing a certain job. And that happened 3 times. Van Cleef & Arpels, Bulgari, and Pomellato. So it's thanks to all of you who've led the way. Now, of course, that doesn't discount, the hard work that we do when we get recognized and acknowledged, and that doesn't discount the achievements along the way. We have to own those, but we should also keep in mind, as you said, the diversity of our communities and our businesses is crucial because we want to obviously evolve. So Pomellato, it's a beautiful Italian brand since 1967. Many of you told me you know it. Had you known I was here, you would be wearing it. Next time, you will be wearing it. And if you don't have any, there's a gift card if you want to come to the store in the next 2 months to acquire some, and my team is here to help. But what's amazing about Pomellato is, seriously, our CEO, 50% of our management, and 70% of our whole entire employee team are women. And we're part of the Kering Group. And if you don't know the Kering Group, you'll recognize our brands. So Gucci, Saint Laurent, Bottega Veneta, McQueen, Balenciaga, Pomellato, Boucheron. And through the Kering Group, we have the Kering Foundation, which was founded by Mr. Pinault and Salma Hayek. This foundation is something for 15 years that we have been leading through generous support, not only from the brands and the board of the foundation, to support women's causes, preventing violence, and preventing human sex trafficking for children and women. So that's 15 years of commitment with the Kering Foundation. And that's really, I think, the corporate responsibility that Kering shows. And I think, Nadine, you talked about commitment and you talk about what we can do for the community to uplift others. And I think that gives us an incredible example. It always gives me an incredible example of what we can do to support. So that's why we're here today, is to support all of you. It's very inspiring to have these incredible founders here. I mean, I was really delighted to see who the panelists were. Inspiring is an understatement. Billion-dollar companies, obviously really impressive. And for us, it's delightful to introduce ourselves because we are kind of quiet. Pomellato, we're not so loud, but as Samira reminded me, the quality speaks out loud. We're a very innovative company, completely manufactured in the city of Milan, if you didn't know that, founded by one gentleman in 1967 until 2015 when Kering bought us, and our CEO, Sabina Belli, who you would love, another icon of a woman, took over and really brought us to who we are today, which is a very clear message about a sisterhood. And that is the common ground between our two organizations. We're a sisterhood. So with that being said, I would like to introduce Julia Boorstin to host our panel.
Thank you so much for having me here for a second year in a row. This is really a treat. I love my job covering media and tech, but this is really my passion, covering female leadership and female entrepreneurs. And it's really an honor to be here. This is my book. I brought a copy to give to Katie, but Julie Wainwright is featured in this book, and I hope you will all check it out to learn more. Just a quick moment about what this conversation is about. I think it's really essential to elevate the stories of female success. There are many of them that are not told, and many of them that are misunderstood or not valued as highly as they should be. And I think everyone, especially men, should be emulating and studying and learning from female success stories, which is why I wrote my book, When Women Lead, but why I also started a new initiative at CNBC called Change Makers, to celebrate female leaders who are transforming business. So if you know any women running businesses, please apply for this new initiative. Just a quick moment before I dive into questions for these two remarkable women. I have known Julie Wainwright for many years. She was CEO of The RealReal when I met her at CNBC. The RealReal was a Disruptor 50 company before it went public. And she was one of the reasons why I wanted to write my book, because I was really impressed by her serial entrepreneurship and her ability to transform industries and also just think differently about established industries and the way things have been going for a long time. I also want to thank her because she personally inspired me to make my book better. And there was a conversation where she said, you need to be ambitious, women need to be ambitious. They need to think of the billion, and I don't know if you even remember this, but I've thanked you many times for it. But women need to be ambitious and not think about the small thing they could try to do, but they need to be thinking about the billion-dollar opportunity. And you need to be ambitious about the way you write this book and think about the book. And it really reframed my thinking. So I thank you for that, Julie.
That's true. I was beating her up. Like,
yeah, she
go
beat me up a little
bigger,
bit.
think
It was
bigger.
great. Think bigger. And then I just got a chance to meet Katie in the lead up to this amazing event, but I've of course been a big fan of her products and her brand and her trailblazing businesses over the many years. And of course, many of you, of course, know Proactiv and Rodan Fields, but I think what you may not know is that she bootstrapped her business and started off with $30,000 and built a multi-billion-dollar empire, and not only built a strong business with her partner, but also did so in a way that empowered so many women to have careers as well. So I think the impact that both Julie and Katie have had in having this multiplier effect, empowering women, helping the environment, and helping give new careers to women who didn't have that option before, I think is really essential. I also have to point out there are 4 generations in the Katie Rodan family here, so 4 generations.
Stand up.
So both of these women are serial entrepreneurs. We have so much we could learn from them, and I thought we should just start off with their origin story. What got them started as founders? And Katie, let's start with you.
Gosh, yeah, it started in business or?
In business.
Well, I started in business when I was 13, actually at Topanga Plaza Mall. I'm serious, I sold products that I made, right? My mother's sitting here, to the Light Brigade. And I think that sort of, I had that entrepreneurial spirit pretty early on. And the surprising thing, I think, to my family is I ended up going to medical school. But the way in which we started Proactiv, my partner Kathy Fields and I, is that we saw a need. I became a dermatologist simply because I wanted to treat acne. So I went to medical school, did all that hard work so I could treat acne, because it was a condition that I cared a lot about because I suffered from it as a teenager. And I knew how that impacts your self-esteem. And so when I got out into practice and I realized that all the products were basically the same products that I had tried that didn't work for me, my friend and partner who I met in my residency at Stanford, we said none of these products make any sense. And we approached it as a dermatologist with the knowledge of why acne happens, and did a completely about-face approach with treating acne, never, ever, ever thinking it would become what it did, and as you said, we started with really not much money. So it began with a personal need that I saw then replicated with my patients.
And then you founded Proactiv, and then you founded Rodan
Yes.
and Fields, and then you sold it, and then you bought it back when it wasn't being managed properly.
This is true. Well, I don't want to say that because
I said it, it's okay.
We had an amazing partnership with Guthrie Ranker for 20 years with Proactiv, and ended up selling that business to Nestle. So growing up with pimples, telling me that I'd make a company that I'd sell to a chocolate company is kind of ironic. But once I think what the surprise with Proactiv was how many lives were changed as a result of fixing people's skin issues. And in private practice, which I practiced up until May of this year when I moved back to LA, there were so many other needs that people had that dealt with the way they felt about themselves, whether it was aging or sensitivity or acne, aging, all of it. And so we started this other company, and we launched it as a retail brand. We were bought within 6 months by Estee Lauder. I remember, well, no, it was a good thing. Listen, I love the Lauders, and it's an amazing company, but it wasn't the right place for us. And we were there for about 3 or 4 years. And then my partner and I looked at each other and said, I think we can do a lot better. We were really not selling that much at retail. Retail was a very troubled time at that point. And Julie knows that well because she veered away from that. And we bought it back and we launched it as a direct selling company. And my husband, my daughter, they were both involved. My husband was our original CEO and chairman of the board and retired a few years ago. My daughter was our third employee when we had 3 employees. And it was the best thing we ever, it was the best thing we ever did because we ended up, I think, surprising Estee Lauder and everybody else with, again, it was solving another need and approaching the market in a more disruptive way.
Now, Julie, I am going to ask you about your current business because Julie has a very exciting new business that you're going to want to hear about. But I think you should tell your origin story of the RealReal because I guarantee you it's a product a platform that most of the people in this room are familiar with and probably customers of.
Well, first of all, thank you very much. I did leave the company 18 months ago. So, I've been in the tech world. I joined Clorox originally in brand management, and I moved to tech in 1982. And through various, this just shows you how, you think people in tech are crazy now. I was in my 20s, and they sent me over to set up international distribution by myself, living in London for a company called Software Publishing, and they were the first company that had Harvard graphics. So here I am in my 20s, traveling all over the world, doing deals, and believe me, if you think you don't see any women now, there were no women traveling around the world doing software deals. But it was great, and I lived in London for 6 years. But I had a long tech history. I ended up being a CEO, and I was a CEO like a lot of women in tech become CEOs because the company was failing. So they're like, oh, promote her, maybe she can do it. This is a documented fact.
It's a phenomenon called the glass cliff phenomenon, and I write about it in my book.
And she wrote about it, and it's a common thing. I happened to have turned that company around. It was a company called Berkeley Systems. And then I went on to the predecessor to Netflix, Real.com, but we only sold movies because the technology wasn't there, but we were the first ones. We were superseding Blockbuster, but I was the CEO to hire. And that company was sold to Hollywood Video, who was going to kill the internet. I swear to God, that was their big idea. And at that time, Reed Hastings called me and goes, how long do I have before they come after you? And I go, 10, 20 years. I think you're going to be fine. And then that is true, too. And then I was asked to run a company called Pets.com. So this is a long story, but it's sort of worth it. So I take this company, I drive it up. It's like a crazy time in the internet. People are giving too much money. I get it to 25 million. My board's like, go public, go public. I take it public. The market crashes. I can't get my secondary. And I'm like, oh, this is bad. And then I had 2 options. I could either run it to bankruptcy, which was pretty clear because, the window's shut for financing companies, especially companies that are more in the red, not-for-profit companies. We were a company that had profit on our mind, but not in our bottom line. And so either bring it to bankruptcy or shut it down and give money back to shareholders. And to be honest, I made the wrong decision. I shut it down to give money back to shareholders. And the reason I made the wrong decision is it was the right thing to do for the shareholders, but who knows, maybe we could have navigated, because if you guys know Chewy now and anyone uses Chewy, it is Pets.com 2.0. minus a few points. So
Ahead of its time.
Yes, so time means everything. Anyway, Pets.com's demise sort of stuck with me, and I became a person that a recruiter named Mr. Love told me that I was unemployable in the Valley. And at that time, I had gone through a divorce. I had had sort of some bad jobs in between, and he said, "Look, you're over. So what are you going to do?" And I thought, okay, I'm at a crossroads, and I was 51, so I wasn't young anymore. Had been divorced. Pets.com sort of ended my marriage. So if everyone who's been through a divorce knows you take your money divided by 2. Not good. Not a good feeling. So that wasn't good. So I'd already had like money, then I'd had half of it, and then I didn't and then I didn't have a career. And so I thought, okay, I got to figure this out. And I was at a crossroads, and I thought I'm either going to go, and this is no disrespect to yoga people, but I thought I'm either going to become a yoga person in Arizona, and I don't really like Arizona, and I don't like yoga. But that was like, in my head, that was the worst thing I could imagine. I have grown to like yoga in Arizona, but at the time I really didn't. And then, or I have to start my own company. And so I gave myself 18 months to do it. And I had all these ideas. I had this wonderful matrix of what Amazon couldn't do, what they could do, where people were going to move in the market, because I knew I wanted to get back in commerce. And of course, I had this beautiful matrix, had no ideas, nothing. And I'm pretty energetic, so I was sort of going a little nuts. And you know how you get inspired sometimes by walking or exercising? Well, I also get inspired by shopping. So I happened to have been shopping with a girlfriend in Menlo Park at a little boutique that had a little bit of consignment in the back. And this woman's a venture capitalist. She's made a lot of money. She went right to the consignment in the back. I've never seen this. I've known her for years. And we walk out of the store, and I'm like, what happened? Oh, my phone just said it was 6 o'clock. It's telling me the time now regularly. I think I hit a wrong dial. Anyway, and I said, what, you just bought consignment. You wouldn't walk in a consignment store. She said, never. I don't like them. It's a bad shopping experience. And I said, would you shop at eBay, by the way, the only alternative online at the time? She said, never, too many fakes. And I said, but you bought consignment. She goes, I got beautiful things. I got Louis Vuitton, I got Gucci, I got Dolce & Gabbana, and it's a great condition. I'll just throw in Palmetto for a friend, but she didn't really then. Because I think it was, you guys weren't here as much. We'll talk about your origin story in the U.S. But anyway, and she said, and I didn't pay a lot for it, and I trust the owner. I know they're authentic. And that was it. Already in my head, I had a map that Amazon could never do luxury, and I also knew I was never going to introduce a luxury brand. I also knew I wanted to get into commerce in a very big space. So that was I remember it so clearly, that was in November. I spent the next couple weeks looking at the luxury market, doing estimates of how much was in people's closets. I called the woman who had the store to say, Lori, do you want to join me? I really want to start this business. By the time she got her life together to give me a call back, I already had a name, I was registered, and I had my first check. All right, and I said, you know what, I'm sorry, I'm moving a little fast for you. The first year I did not take venture capital funding because I knew I had the Pets.com puppet on my shoulder, and also the venture capital community, like many financial organizations, is run by men. And they don't necessarily, in the Valley, shop for luxury goods. And they don't necessarily really understand that market at all. And like I said, I had that little negative pup. And also, I had the puppet, and then I was probably 20 to 25 years older than most of the people I would, in the future, meet with. So you have an old woman with, not really, but in their mind. They had an old woman with the puppet on her shoulder, doing something really, really strange. So I got the business to 10 million by bootstrapping, a little bit of friends and family money, and a couple entrepreneurs that had known me, and there you go. So
And
that's a long
yeah,
story,
But the fact is that these two women and all the female founders in this room have defied the odds, and the odds are very much against women. Not that they can't defy these odds, but they're pretty dramatic. And one reason I wrote my book is because over the prior decade or so, female founders have drawn an average of 3% of venture capital funding, and between when I started writing my book and now, that has declined to 1.8%. So 1.8% of all VC dollars go to female founders. The percentage of deals is larger because women's checks are on average smaller, which is not a great thing either. So it's tough, but I think the idea of you spending your first year without raising VC dollars ended up being an advantage for you when you went to the market. But Katie, tell us why you...
Not really.
Not
We'll
really?
talk about
Yeah.
No, but I mean, honestly, the stories of people, look, all my early investors were either one European man, because he understood luxury, Matthias Schilling at Headline, and then two females. One of the females, Dana Settle, here from Graycroft, local firm, but she had to fight the men in her firm to make that investment, and I had to keep the round open. And they came in early, but they didn't lead. They would have made a lot more money if they led. And it was a fight for her. So even then, when you have a $10 million business that went from a concept to nothing in 1 year, and so 10 million, and I wanted to raise 10 million, and it was hard.
Yeah, I mean, one thing that so many female founders have told me is when they pitch to men, the men said, well, I don't know, like, my wife doesn't need another handbag. Like, let me ask my assistant. Let me bring the assistant in here.
It's not about need.
It's about need. So tell us about your decision, about your decision not to raise financing for that first business.
Well, for any business, by the
For
way.
any business.
The luckiest thing that I think ever happened is I'm the beneficiary of low expectations. And I don't think anyone ever wanted to invest in either my partner or I. They didn't count my light brigade entrepreneurial experience at age 13 as having a business background. I don't know why, but they didn't. So we had to bootstrap it. We had no other way. My husband and I, we had two little kids. The oldest is right here. And we had no money. We were struggling with a mortgage payment. It was the recession. Both businesses, by the way, we started during recessions. And it literally had to come out of our checkbooks. And it happened over 5 years that my partner and I each invested a total of $30,000. And I typed up our first contract on a typewriter. Tells you how long ago that was, 1991. And it says Katie Rodan and Kathy Fields are 50-50 partners in a skincare business, blah, 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 blah. It's like 3 lines. And I'm the daughter of a judge, so I have a little legal background. Not really. But the last line is, all expenses over $50 must be approved by both parties prior to incurring the expense. Because we had to buy diapers, I mean, so we were, the lucky thing is you get very resourceful. And I have a very smart husband who does have an MBA from Harvard, and he said, look, we have no money. We had just both finished school. And you're going to have to find somebody to license it to. So we were very lucky, and we were introduced through my mother to Guthrie Ranker when they were starting out in their infomercial business. And so we created, with our $30,000, we created the formulas, we created the positioning, we had the name, which is a story in and of itself, because we paid nothing for it. It was an amazing name. And we presented it all to Neutrogena, because that was our first choice to license it to. And we literally opened our kimono, told them everything, and of course we're at risk that they're going to copy us, because what we did had never been done before. It never happened. And so they turned us down, and then Guthrie Ranker comes along, starting this infomercial business, and we licensed the product to them. So we got royalties, and it was just a wonderful partnership for so long. And when we created Rodan Fields, we took royalties that we were making to invest it in this new company. And believe me, there were lots of moments when, I'd look at my husband and go, do you think we're going to make it? And he'd go, I don't know, we got to keep trying. But it was such luck that no one ever wanted to invest in us. So fine, it really was. It really was, because we owned everything. So when we sold Proactiv, we sold the license, the product and all that to Nestle. We owned it. No, we didn't have anybody who'd invested in us. And when we did Rodan Fields, we owned all of that because, again, we couldn't even get a bank loan. So that was true even with Rodan Fields, even with a track record, because it was the recession. So we ended up taking in TPG as an investor really for liquidity, because all of our assets were tied up in one company. So we thought, well, maybe we should take some money off the table. That was the first time we ever got anybody involved, and that was just a few years ago. So it's lucky. It's good to kind of not have to answer to anyone else and to do the right thing for your business long term. So.
You mentioned your family, and I want to sort of get personal for a moment before we get into sort of the advice part of this, because I always wonder with entrepreneurs, first of all, like, how did you have the courage to try something so risky? What enabled you to be so creative to find these solutions and to come up with this idea of putting a new product in the world, whether it was the RealReal or Rodan Fields or Proactiv, and also what gave you the persistence? And so I know Julie has an amazing family that really inspired her, but Katie, you mentioned your father was a judge. Katie, do you want to start this one off?
Yeah, oh my gosh. Well, I come from the luckiest thing in the world is I was born to the parents that I had. So my father was Judge Harry Pregerson. He passed away about 6 years ago. And he was on the Ninth Circuit Court of Appeals for 50 years. And my mother is a microbiologist. And neither one of them are at all interested in business, making money, or anything like that. They are completely, their whole entire focus of their lives is to really save the world and to really help people. And that was really instilled in us. So that was a very important part of everything that we've ever done and continue to want to do, is to make a difference in people's lives. But how did I come about it? My mother used to say to me, whose child are you? I went to Disneyland when the days when you had booklets that the A ticket, the E ticket and all that. And I was with my Girl Scout troop, and I come home and with a bunch of money in my pocket. My mom goes, where'd you get the money? I said, well, I stood outside the ticket booth all over the entire park, and I sold all of my tickets so I could make money. And she's like, you didn't do any of the rides? No. And it's like, where did you come from? So, I always wanted to kind of be independent, never, have to depend on anybody to take care of me. And that started really young. And risks are relative because we took very calculated risks. So, we didn't bet the farm. We had, a house that we owned had a big mortgage on at the time, but we weren't going to take out a second mortgage and risk being thrown out on the street. So we were very careful, and when you don't have money, you're very, very creative as to how you spend it and extremely careful. So I think they were all calculated risks that paid off, and obviously as things progress in business, the risks get bigger and bigger, and it takes a team to help you appreciate sort of what the decision-making process is and how to make the right decisions. So that's sort of how it all happened.
And Julie, where did you come from? Where was serial entrepreneur running so many companies, always the only woman in the room for so many years?
Well, I'm the oldest of four. Both of my parents met in art school, the Art Institute of Chicago. My father went on to start his own art and design company, and sadly, my mother had MS at the age of 28, so I was the oldest. It was misdiagnosed for years, well, for 8 years, but she was pretty debilitated by the time she was 36. It's terrible now. It was worse then because there was absolutely no real medication for it. But, all right, so that's the sad start. But look, they were both creative. My father, much like your parents, like my father was like, oh my God, who are you? But I also had to be, I had to take care of my brothers and sisters, which made me, whether I really had to or not, in my head I had to. And I really did have to step up, which made me incredibly independent. It made me want to go out and do things on my own. And I had incredible support from my father and my mother when she was well enough. And that resilience building is actually phenomenal. I mean, it really does. So I would say it ended up, and my father on his deathbed apologized for it. I'm like, it didn't turn out so bad. I mean, right? It's like, come on, Dad. He's like, you never had a childhood. I'm like, oh, it's okay. It all worked out. So I would say, though, having a father was an entrepreneur who loved his job and was a creative entrepreneur and was actually started the business in the home, then had a company and had fairly large accounts like Chevrolet, well, Studebaker back then Chevrolet, then Kohler, and having someone always thinking creatively. And my mother's, that was also her bent, actually did serve me well in the business world because I do think differently. And I think every entrepreneur thinks differently, otherwise they wouldn't have done what they do. Yeah. You do see the world differently, and mine started very early with parents that thought completely out of the box.
Yeah, and female entrepreneurs think even more differently than male entrepreneurs tend to. I'm curious about both of your leadership styles. And I would say, and because Julie gave me a look, I think that women have an advantage in being an outsider sometimes and seeing established industries with more perspective.
Well, women entrepreneurs lead differently than women in corporate.
Yes.
And the tech world is different than corporate, but if you just look at the successful female entrepreneurs I know, they're collaborators. They surround themselves with good people. They're at the buck still stops with them and someone has to make a decision. They also rely on really smart people. They prefer to collaborate to create something bigger than you do as yourself. It's not hierarchical. And I don't know, I think in your book it was pretty much the same. That is a really good formula in the tech world. And it also works in a high growth world because no one has all the answers. So you're just always constantly asking people, what do you think? What do you think? You come up with the best idea and you steer the ship. The only difference, and the RealReal when I was running it, had mostly women on my team, and once you start bringing men in, they tended, and I'm not kidding, would repeat things that, we all know this happens, sorry guys in the room, they tended to repeat what the women said, and then at one point I had to talk my entire team off the edge because this guy kept doing it. I go, you know what, he's just processing your information. I don't really think he's trying to take credit for you. I think he just thinks out loud. So let's just cut him slack. But it's a collaborative, cooperative group where you hire really great people and you get a better solution than you do by yourself.
Yeah, there is data about that. Women tend to be communal leaders and also to invest more in learning from people from across the organization to synthesize that information and make their own decisions. What do you think, Katie? What's your perspective on leadership? What kind of leader are you?
So it's in our company. So I have a saying or advice to anybody who's a budding entrepreneur: put your aces in their places. And one thing that would be my nightmare job would be to be a CEO of any company and to have people actually report to me. So I left that to much smarter people, as I said, with my husband. And then in our company, it was actually, it was a company founded by women and mostly run by women and a few good men. But so they were, in terms of leading employees and working that, my partner and I, we were more front-facing with the field. So I think it's really in terms of, I believe, in our case of our business, which is independent, it's a direct selling business for those of you who don't know what that is. It's everyday people who love the product, who use the product, who want to sell the product and make a business out of it. And I think at our peak, I don't know, we had close to 1 million people selling our product, just selling it, and lots more than that in customers. But it's like attracts like, and you have to sort of put yourself out there and be that person that can set an example for a field like our independent sellers. And I happen to love people, and I love to hear people's stories. And I don't like to be the one up here telling the story, but I love to hear them. And it's sort of that energy that I think we bring, my partner and I bring, and it's really more of the vision. So that's one thing I think that I've been able to successfully do, is see around corners and see where things could go and question the status quo and say, let's try it let's go in a completely different direction. But the great thing is that they're really smart people who can execute upon that, because ideas are a dime a dozen, but execution is everything.
Yeah, that's such a powerful nugget. One thing that I think is interesting about both of you is you've kept on doing this. Multiple companies, out there again with the entrepreneurial spirit. You could be doing yoga in Arizona, but you've chosen not to. But I'm curious, and before we hear about Ahara, your new company, Julie, tell us a little bit about how your leadership approach has changed over the years. What do you know now running a company that you wish you had known 20 years ago?
Honestly, the world of management's changed, and it's an interesting time to manage because the generation, especially the younger millennials, are a little softer, a little more coddled. They need, even at a senior level, they need a little bit more encouragement. Accountability is always important in every company, and a good leader has to hold people accountable. When I was coming up in the ranks, literally, especially in the early days at Clorox, literally the GM would sit on your desk and say, I need to understand why our share dropped in Fort Wayne, Indiana, and I want to know by the end of the night. It would be like 7 o'clock at night in Oakland, California, and the 15th floor of an office building that I thought I had to take mass transportation home without Uber. And I'd be like, okay, and believe me, Oakland actually goes through its phases. It was not in a good phase then. And you know what? And we did it. We just worked hard and we gave them the answer, and the answer was checked and double checked, and I looked through the numbers, and you had to hand crunch the numbers. And so, because computers weren't there at that time, we had mainframes, and we worked off and did tertiary analysis off mainframes. I had the answer. The guy was still in his office. Walk it in there, give it to him. He checks the numbers. You go home. You can't do that today. You can really. It's a different style, and I would say, for me, it's a little bit of a harder style because I'm used to people having great passion and working really hard and moving forward and being accountable and owning things. And I've had to learn how to be more understanding of their personal issues. And I would say I'm still working on that. Because part of me is like, well, I can't solve that problem, but maybe we can focus here. But the only other thing that I've carried through on every team I've led, I've been a CEO since the 90s, is humor, and also keeping people inspired. And I would say those two things never go out of style.
Katie, you're nodding. How has your approach changed over the years?
I don't know if my approach has really changed. I've gotten more experienced. I don't know that the approach has really changed. Ask me something else.
Yeah. I guess the question is, what do you wish you knew then that you know now? When you were starting out either of your companies, is there something that you would have done differently with all the experience that you have now?
Well, what I wish I had known from the very beginning is how well it would turn out. Because you really don't know that going in. It's very unexpected. I think that sometimes bad luck can be really good luck, and failure is feedback, and so you learn. I love Carol Dweck's book, Mindset, because it is all about a growth mindset, and learning those lessons and pivoting to something that is going to work out a lot better. I think, and also not to worry. I spent so much of my time worrying, and my father used to say to me when I would tell him I was worried about something, he'd go, okay, tell me real fast the last 10 things you worried about. And I couldn't remember one of them. He said, see, they never turned out. So I think as I've gotten older, I've learned to worry less and just, keep plugging away. And things have a nice way of turning out, generally speaking.
Worry less is good advice. Julie, I want to make sure you talk a little bit about your new company and what inspired you to create it. And then we are going to get to audience Q&A, but I have a couple more questions first. So tell us about Ahara. Why, after the RealReal, have you pivoted and gone into nutrition?
All right, so we all went through COVID, not a good experience. And during COVID, besides trying to keep the RealReal afloat, I also started looking at all the nutrition solutions that were being enabled by technology, and they were all pretty bad. And I absolutely love starting companies. I thought I had one more in me. I wanted to get the company in a good state. And then also, I was living in Northern California. I wanted to move to LA. So I had other goals. And I convinced a medical doctor, Dr. Melina Jampoulos, who shifted her whole career to focus on nutrition about 17 years ago, to join me, and we launched a precision nutrition company called Ahara about 90 days ago. It's ahara.com. Right now, the early uptake has been concierge doctors are recommending it for their patients, and we're in discussions. We're developing programs for corporate. And why nutrition? Look, I grew up in Indiana, and I don't know if you've seen I don't know if you've seen the medical stats. Actually, diabetes and obesity is really, really taking over, and it is a huge medical problem all over the world, but especially in the U.S. And when you look at how do you solve it, well, you don't solve it with drugs in the hospital in your last days of your life. You solve it now ahead of time. It's with food first. And then if you really need an intervention with medicine, and even with the weight loss drugs that have come out, they're already finding when people get off of it, they gain the weight and some back again. So this isn't just an obesity or diabetes program. It's bigger than that. But we are going to focus on that in a clinical setting. For corporate people, we're going to help with, the food you eat affects your brain. It affects really everything you do. Your heart is obvious. We have a lot of studies on that. Eating different foods can actually either increase anxiety or decrease it, increase depression or decrease it. And no one has done a precision nutrition product because the tools to measure it weren't there until about the last year and a half. So this is a product that isn't a one-size-fits-all. We take into consideration a health survey, your family health history, your biometrics, your nutrigenomics, so how your body absorbs on a genetic level certain nutrients. And then we do also look at how you're aging internally through methylation process. And it's all in an algorithm that recommends what you need to eat. Also, if food isn't enough, what supplements you need to take and what further testing you may need. And usually the testing is more about vitamin D or omegas or an inflammation marker. So it's food first, it's all based in science, and as I said, the first uptake is concierge doctors are finding their clients that have been on Ozempic, when they came off, they didn't know what to do. And then also longevity, but our real focus will be in the corporations and then running clinical trials for diabetes.
Very exciting. And it's an awesome platform. I get the newsletters, and they were talking about brain fog today. I was like, oh, yes, I'm familiar with that. So before we open up to questions, just a final thought from each of you on advice to entrepreneurs or women who are interested in founding something, either those who already have their passion or know what the ideas they're pursuing, or those that are circling around it. Both of you had this aha moment. For you, it was, Katie, it was the experience of acne and wanting to make sure that other people didn't have to suffer through that. Is there any advice you would give to entrepreneurs earlier in their journey?
Yeah, I think it has to be, at least for me, it's always sort of evolved from a personal issue that I had, that I cared passionately and deeply about, and I knew if it affected me, it probably affected a lot of people. So you want to find, I think if you're thinking about business, a real sort of niche in the market that solves a problem that you care a lot about. If you have skills, like we used, the advantage that my partner and I had is as dermatologists, we understand, I'm going to use a big word, had to go to medical school to say this, pathophysiology of skin disease, so we understand the cause, so we can do a different approach. So it's really sort of marrying your skills, your passions with the marketplace, and then getting very, very lucky, and we were talking about this, with timing. Because timing, there really is a lot of luck involved with that. And that's why I know it's not, that's a significant part of the success. So it's, had we started Proactiv 5 years earlier, 5 years later, it wouldn't have been what it is today. So I think if you can find that problem you care passionately about, and you don't do it for the money. My partner and I never, ever, ever expected to make a lot of money or anything like that with this. We just thought it was a business opportunity that seemed to make sense, and it would help people in the process. So, because if you're in it to just make money, I always say it's a lot easier to go work for Goldman Sachs. You're more assured of getting there.
Julie, advice?
So one of the reasons it took me so long, it wasn't just out of desperation to start my own company, is I kept, and women do this all the time, I kept thinking, well, I have more to learn, I have more to learn, I have more to learn. And the truth is, the men I met, look, what I had to do is sit myself down and talk, because I'd been working in a VC firm for a while after Pets, and the guys that would pitch and actually get money, they were fine. I mean, they weren't Bill Gates. They weren't, they were fine. And yet they walked in, they owned it. They had less experience than many that I ever did. And I hadn't even started my own company yet. And I could see through their plans. I could help them. And then I thought, this is ridiculous. And by the way, and you very seldom saw a woman. But then when I would coach women entrepreneurs or women who wanted to be an entrepreneur, they kept thinking, well, I still have a lot to learn. And what I would say is you have to stop that chatter in your head. You can go out there and do it, because if it's a really great idea, and I would encourage you to think big, and I would also encourage you to realize that you're going to drive your own destiny, and the bigger you get, the more opportunities you have to help a lot of people and employ great people, but you will learn it on the job, and you have probably everything you need inside of you to start it now, and stop second guessing yourself. Because I have to tell you, sitting in those pitch rooms, I never heard one man second guess themselves, even if they were 24 years old.
Yeah. And if I can add to that, I think it's exactly what you're speaking to, and it's trust your instincts. Because I think as women, we tend to doubt it. And men are born with sort of a swagger and a confidence that, it took me having, climbing the ladder of success, doing things that were really challenging, like, for me, switching from history, being a history major and going to medical school, and finding I could do that. Well, if I could do that, I could do this. And so, but men tend to have that, and we tend to doubt our capabilities. And trust your instincts, because when I look back, I go, wow, they were really right on. And maybe, at times I was afraid to speak up, so don't let that happen.
And I would say it's not innate. I would say it's socialized. It's taught.
I agree.
Men and
Okay.
women aren't born different when it comes to things like confidence and ambition. It's what we are taught by our society. And the more we have stories of women like yourselves who are succeeding and defying the odds and doing things your own way, then that starts to change what the next generation realizes that they're capable of, and changes their swagger. Because they should, first of all, they should know that the men are walking with more swagger than they are, so they could be educated about that. And I talk about that a little bit in the book. But also, we need to realize we're holding ourselves back and not anymore. Yeah.
If I can do it, you can do it,
Yeah.
really.
So now let's open up to some
Yeah.
questions. Anyone? We have one over here. Wait, we're going to go up here for a second.
Check, check. We got it. All right.
Julia, will you tell us your origin story?
Sure. I've only had 2 jobs, which makes my origin story sort of short. My first job out of college was at Fortune magazine. I was going to go to grad school and study international relations, but all my friends were moving to New York, and I decided to defer for a year. And guess what? I never went. So I was the youngest person Fortune magazine had ever hired. It was 2000. I was hired right before the stock market crashed. I started 2 months later. And I had never taken an econ class, which I was very anxious about. So I overcompensated. And I did a lot of homework, and I spent a lot of late nights in the Time and Life building studying from these older journalists and editors, including one older woman named Carol Loomis, who is a legendary editor, and I learned so much from her. And the fact that I was so insecure and anxious about whether or not I deserved to be in the room actually enabled me to overcompensate and made me better at writing all the quant-heavy articles than my colleagues were, because they had taken econ and weren't worried about it. I was very worried about it. So that ended up serving me in good stead. And then I had a boss, I had a mentor. We didn't talk about mentorship, which is a whole nother conversation, but I had a male mentor who had 2 daughters who were younger, and he treated me the way that he would have wanted someone to treat his daughters, and he pushed me. And I was invited to go on CNN to talk about a story I'd written. I was like, I can't do that. I'm 22 years old. What do I know? He said, of course you should do it. Nobody knows anything. Go talk about your story on TV. You're fine. And so he pushed me outside of my comfort zone. And I thought it was so hilarious that I was on live television at 22 years old answering questions about a business story that I was kind of almost laughing, and I didn't get nervous. And so I became a regular on CNN. And then so 5 years later, after 5 years of that, I was offered a full-time job at CNBC. I thought I would last a year, and it's been 13 and a half years. So
That's great.
yeah.
Thank you for all of you sharing your stories with us. It's very inspiring. Since you mentioned mentorship, that's one of the things that I was going to ask, talking about how important it is for women to trust their instincts and knowing that society basically mold us to second guess ourselves. Or do you have anything in your plans, or have you done anything to mentor not only women, younger generation, to teach them to give them the ropes to learn how to climb up? Because that's something that we're missing in the society. Competition is there, it's great, but leadership comes with mentorship. Yes. Being able to teach others how to follow your steps will be something that you can leave a legacy behind. What do you have to share?
Oh, I help people all the time. I help entrepreneurs all the time. I get more female entrepreneurs coming to me. I don't, charge them. I don't take stock. I just like, sure, I'll help you. And then I have to always give the caveat, it's as good as what you pay for, and it's free. So you have to be careful. But I'm always happy to help. And then the same thing, there's a lot of young people going in, creating not-for-profits now. And there's one in New York in particular called Project Healthy Minds that actually, I gave him money early. He wrote a business plan. It was like listening to a tech entrepreneur pitch. And then whenever I go to one of their events, I give him unsolicited feedback. And he doesn't really ask for it, but that's not the point. The point is, I do feel compelled to help young people do really great things, as long as I feel like it's not, like one of the things we didn't talk about, one of my key passions about the RealReal is that it brought to the forefront all the danger fashion's doing in the world for landfills and environmentally, and getting people to think about recirculating. I won't help into entrepreneurs that are doing something that I believe is detrimental for the planet or another person. I won't do it. And I tell them that. I'm like, can't you take all that good energy and put it to something that's going to be better and enhancing, not necessarily taking away?
That's great.
And just to add on to that, this idea of having a purpose-driven company, there's a lot of data showing that purpose-driven companies, meaning for-profit companies that also have a component of helping the environment or helping society in some way, they tend to be more successful both as public companies and as private companies. And there's a lot of data showing that women are more likely to found purpose-driven companies. Part of that is that women actually are statistically say they care more about the environment than men do. They say they donate more philanthropically than men do. A lot of stats on that. But interestingly, there's also a study I cite in my book showing that women with purpose-driven companies are more likely to raise money than men are, because the component of having purpose satisfies the stereotype that women are supposed to be warm and nurturing. So it's like a whole web of complicated stuff in there, and there's more about it. And a chapter on purpose-driven companies in my book. Yeah, sorry, I interrupted.
Hi. I thought the name, The RealReal, was really genius. And I wondered if it was your idea or you got help. And also, how important do you think a name is in starting a new business?
All right, so here's the story with the RealReal. I had an idea. I knew everything had to be authenticated, and it had to, and there were 3 of us sitting around a bar in San Francisco on their internet. I had my computer, because it's also hard to buy a URL. And I knew it was going to be an online business. And I kept saying to people, this 2 girlfriends, it has to be real. It has to be real. And we were typing it, and this woman, Kim, goes, well, is it real? And I'm like, can I buy RealReal? And it turns out I could buy the RealReal for $5,000. And I bought it right then. We shut the bar down. We all went home, and I'm like, I got it. So I'm much better about setting what I want the name to say and what it stands for, and then brainstorm with people. How important is a name? I think a name can be anything. You can make a name be anything. I mean, we didn't think of Twitter until there was a Twitter. We don't, a lot of tech names are sort of all, but I do think that it helps when it actually reinforces what the brand stands for. I think it's really hard, but it is hard to get that creative, and it's hard to get creative and then also be able to buy that URL.
I can attest to that. And we paid $5,000 for Proactiv too. And it was a really funny story, because we walked into one of the big ad firms called Landor and Associates in San Francisco, thinking maybe we could get help with the name. And I think they took one look at my partner and I and went, these girls can't afford us. But the gentleman who took the meeting with us says, just a minute, I'll be right back. And he runs to the back and he brings out this young guy and he says, meet Courtney Reeser. He's really smart. He's going to go out next week and he's going to hang up his own shingle and start his own company. You could be his first client. So we went, okay. So we told him all about the product that we were doing, that our name signifies exactly, Proactiv, exactly what set the product apart. Because all the medicines that were designed to treat acne was treating a pimple after the pimple came, not beforehand. And as a dermatologist, that's like a dentist saying, go brush the tooth that has the cavity. You don't need to brush your teeth every day. So being proactive rather than reactive. So he listens to our whole story about the positioning and what we're doing, and it's skincare, and my partner and I go home and we're dreaming of names like Derma Beautiful and Ondine with, like a mermaid on it, or, I don't know. We just had this fantasy in our minds. And we go back, and whenever we were really going to do an important business meeting, we'd take my husband along as our business expert. And so the three of us are sitting there, and Courtney says, I have a name, I have a name, I have a name. And we're like, and he's literally vibrating in the chair. And we're like, what's the name, what's the name? And he had this card where he had done the name and the sort of logo of the name, and he flips it over, and it's Proactiv without an E. And my partner and I are like going, what? That doesn't sound good. My husband says, that is genius. That is genius. He goes, it's everything your product stands for, and it's different. It's not like any other skincare brand. And he looks at Courtney and he says, is the name available? He said, yes. He goes, buy it now. I'll explain to the girls later why this is really important. And so we sort of accepted it, and it turned out to be the exact right thing. So I think a name can really make a difference, especially if you have a very differentiated product. The name can really stand out.
I love that story. This has been, is it on? Okay, thank you. This has been incredibly inspiring, and thank you for being so authentic and real and sharing your stories and your journey. My question is, in order to be exactly where you are, I know there have been hard days, and days where, as you said, for some people, and often it was men, it just came natural, whether it was the swagger. And what was the self-talk that you did or continue to do now on those tough days to keep you going? Because I think we all sometimes have those days that are tough, and sometimes it is that story that we're hearing in our heads that are stopping ourselves. So what story do you tell yourself to keep going forward? Thank you.
I'll start. I mean, first of all, I do think exercise really plays an important role for me. That I find that my head clears and my issues get easier and I need to it's not like I need to sweat. So if I'll get out and so I utilize that quite a bit. I mean, and I'm one of those people, I'll go 7 days, I'm like, oh, I got to take a day off, and that day off I'm grumpy. But I do find exercise clears my mind and keeps me centered. But the other thing, when I was starting the company, and it really did feel, with the RealReal, make it or break it for me, someone said to me, which I think everyone should hear and believe, you have everything inside of you that you need to move forward, and you just need to believe in yourself. And I think that's true at whatever age. I mean, it does. Everyone needs support. Everyone needs people that can guide them and give them good advice, and tell you the hard truths. But at the end of the day, when you're an entrepreneur, it is all about you, and you have to find it inside of yourself. And my bet is you have more inside yourself than you think, and you can do amazing things. So I think holding that true to yourself and reminding yourself, even if you have to write it down and look at it, isn't a bad idea.
Yeah, that's true.
One more question.
Again, it's that grit and that tenacity. And having grown up with a father who had been a Marine in World War II and fought in the Battle of Okinawa, he was always, in his own funny ways, teaching my brother and I a lot of great life lessons. And he used to say to me in this kind of gruff voice, Katie, every day, life is a battlefield. Some days you're fighting little skirmishes, and other days it's great big wars. And and I'd laugh, but what he was really saying to me is expect problems. Life is not easy street. Every day you're going to face a problem. Some are going to be really big, and some of them are not going to be so big. So I think at the times, and believe me, there have been many times I've faced where I've just gone, this is the dragon slayer moment and, we're going down, or the tubes, or something happens personally, and your mind sort of takes you to the worst place. And then if you have that sort of resilience inside of you, and that need to always push forward, you find that strength, and you just put one foot in front of another and keep marching forward, and expect that, there'll be another little problem that'll probably happen as soon as you solve this one. So
I'm going to interject a little bit more from my book, because this is a perfect example of some of the research in my book, is that there's an amazing study, multiple studies about kids and grit. And it's been found that if kids hear about their family history and how there were ups and there were downs, and we were rich and we were poor, and I fought in the war and it was hard, but then I came back, if they hear about the ups and downs, those kids have a lot more sense of their own potential for grit, because they know it's not always going to be easy, because it wasn't easy for their grandpa and it wasn't easy for their dad or their mom. And so hearing about that is really powerful in building kids' own sense of resilience. And I've actually thought about that a lot as a mom. The other thing, there's a lot of research about the importance of having an identity outside of work. And women are more likely to have identities outside of work. I'm a mom. When times get tough for me, I think about, you know what, at least I had a good day with my kids yesterday, and that helps. You're a doctor. Julie, you've described yourself as an artist. I mean, you have all these outside activities or personalities or passions, and this research has found that the people who know that they're more than just that job that day, when the going gets tough, they don't take it as personally, because they know that that's not all that they are. And so I think it's really interesting to think about whether it's going on a run or knowing that, well, I'm a doctor and I invented this formula, to have these outside identities. And I think so often being a mom and having an identity other than just being a worker bee has been described as a negative thing. And I spent most of my career being told to don't let anyone know that you have an identity outside of work. But the reality is that identity outside of work can oftentimes be the thing that's most transformative in making you more successful.
Thank you. I really appreciate your generosity of spirit, all three of you. I mean, I can just feel how much you want our success, and that is so beautiful.
That's true.
I think as women, we're taught not to put ourselves out there, and I'll just speak for myself. Part of my challenge in being an entrepreneur is promotion and marketing. We're not supposed to put ourselves out there, be seen, et cetera. And I have a book launch coming up, and I love that, this is such a beautiful way to introduce us to your book. Any tips on getting over that thing of, not supposed to do, we have to do promotion, especially as entrepreneurs. I would love any words of wisdom on that.
Oh, all right. So first of all, you wrote a book, right? You did it with an intent that someone would read it. And it was probably an intent bigger than you. So when you go out and promote it, don't worry about yourself, worry about your intent, and make sure you share that intent. And then at some point you'll get over that other thing, because you need to get over that other thing. If you wrote a book, you put all that energy into it, and then you should hold the stage, and you should hold it with pride, and you should talk about the work, and chances are you wrote a book that actually someone somewhere will relate to in a way that will be transformative, and hold on to it. So if you can't do it for yourself, do it for your mission, and at some point those two will come together.
It's 100%. It's all about purpose. When you have a purpose and you're working on something that is so much bigger than yourself, you will go out there and fight for it. And it's so true, because you're sharing a gift and you're sharing experiences, and it's going to help somebody out there. And that's where you have to start from.
Yeah. I mean, I'll just say, I wrote a book. It was really hard for me at first. I like to be the one asking the questions, not the one answering them. It's much easier to ask questions than answer them. But I found that once I started getting the feedback on the book, and women from Australia would email me and say, oh my God, this book is changing my life. I'm going to be able to do this differently. Then I was like, okay, this is worth it. I'm going to be uncomfortable. I'm going to sit in that discomfort, and I'm going to push myself, because it's worth it for my mission. Yes. So we're out of time, and I'm just going to wrap it up and really really tie it back to the principles that I think are so important to stress here, and the principles that inspired me to write my book. But the way that both of you lead is so exemplary, and not just for women leaders. And I think that's what's really essential here, is I wrote my book, When Women Lead, not so women could learn from women, but so there could be more women. So you're not the rare examples, and you're not a female CEO. You're a CEO who's defied crazy odds and should be celebrated. And I think we are in a culture where we all want to defy the odds. This is what America is about. So trying to understand what it is that enabled that. But I think one thing that Julie pointed out was communal leadership, and this idea that women are more likely to lead by drawing on the value of their teams. What you talked about being purpose-driven, Katie, and this idea of really finding your passion and being relentless about making sure that you achieve that. These are things that women are more likely to do. This idea of women being more likely to have a purpose-driven company that's going to help the environment or help people, also very data-driven. This is something that women are more likely to do. This is something we should be celebrating. And I think ultimately the reason I wrote my book is because I want everyone to be able to break free from these stereotypes of what a good leader looks like. And when I was a young reporter at Fortune magazine, it was Jack Welch, and everyone should lead a company the way GE was run, and that was it. Guess what? Didn't turn out too well. But it also was just this one icon of leadership, and it didn't embrace or leave room for the way that everyone should not force themselves to be something they're not. They should figure out what they're good at. What Katie was saying about, I don't want to be the CEO. I want to be the founder and the creator and the person interfacing with the people, because that's what I love. Julie's saying, I'm good at identifying this space in the market and doing things differently. And I think that's really what my book is about identifying your own personal superpowers. And a lot of that is finding things that many people would say are flaws. Why should you not want to be the CEO? I've had so many people say that. Why not? Why wouldn't you want to be the CEO? Well, it's like, maybe I wouldn't be the best CEO. But taking these things that are really about self-knowledge and taking a trait and turning it into a superpower is what I think that's really about. And I'll just end on one thing on community, because that's really what this is. There's a lot of data. Again, I'm very data-driven. My book has 40 pages of endnotes. It's not actually as long as it looks. A lot of data showing that women do not network and do not ask for professional help from their friends, business contacts, whatever, as much as men do. And networking, the decline in female networking is not tied to when they have kids and families. The decline happens whether or not women have kids and families. The way networking has worked for decades just tends not to work for women. It's frustrating to them. Yet, all the data shows that having a group of people, a diverse assortment of people to draw on for professional advice is incredibly valuable, which seems like a very obvious thing to say, but women have what they call an ick factor. They feel uncomfortable asking for an introduction, asking for advice, asking how much someone is earning in a job or how much money they're raising and what kind of terms they are. These things are really essential. And again, these things are socialized. Women are socialized not to feel comfortable making those asks, but the community is really powerful. And I think that's what's so beautiful about what you have here is not just to learn from each other, but also to ask of each other. So I hope you will all do that. And then the other thing is there's power in what they call microenvironments. Many of you work in corporate environments or are pitching to rooms of men where you're going to be the only one. I spent much of my career as the only one. And again, the data shows that if you're ever in a situation where you're the only one, it's powerful to be able to go back and be part of a microenvironment of other people like you. Because it reminds you, look, there are all these amazing female leaders who've defied the odds, female CEOs, and there's something about this kind of group for a business world which is incredibly male-dominated to know that this exists has power and value beyond anything we can really even wrap our heads around. So thank you for having me. I want to thank Katie Rodan and Julie Wainwright for being here. And thanks you to all of you and to Visionary Women. Thank you so much.